Welcome everybody. So we wanted to talk quickly this morning a little bit about rather than the hard side of recovery and the hard side of ransomware and attacks and things like that. We wanted to talk a little bit about how to make your organization itself a little bit more secure by breaking down some of the barriers in between different departments. So siloing is not secure, quite simple. So briefly here, what we'll talk about is the problem with siloing. We'll go through a couple of definitions because I think definitions are really important, particularly when you're talking about, recovery, business continuity, security, things like that. And also want to talk about how siloing simply doesn't work. And I think we got an example that will kind of drive it home for you. And then finally, talking about teams and how they need to find alignment and some ways that they can find alignment also. So Patrick is a systems engineer at Veeam Software. He's got over 2 decades in the IT industry, and he has worked with just about everything out there as far as different software packages go. So he's got a lot of great experience and very helpful guy to work with on a lot of different things.
And Kevin is actually an MBA from Arizona State, certified by Business Continuity in 2014, which I am as well. It has over 15 years in business continuity, disaster recovery, 10 years from server and application experience. And with that strong customer background, he's now part of the Sayers team. I believe you're the solutions architect for business continuity now?
That's correct. But yeah, I've worked in a bunch of different industries. So siloing. Well, everybody's kind of familiar with it, but I think specifically in dealing with what we're talking about today with security is that security and IT infrastructure, they got to work together. Otherwise, you're not going to have good continuity of operations, continuity for your systems. But the thing is that a lot of organizations, they just don't bring the two of them together in a productive manner. And in a lot of cases, I mean, I've seen this at a few different companies I've worked at, is that the organizations, they may even have some opposition between the two, or opposition is encouraged between the two, because, they might be committing for the same budget dollars or some of the same resources.
And Kevin, just to add to that, from what we heard from Ed and Eric at the beginning of this event, the psychology and about people and training people, this is a big deal. The bad guys are getting together, they're cooperating. We need to have the same thing on our side as well.
Well put, sir. So I said I wanted to talk a little bit about definitions, and I think they're important. I wanted to talk a little bit first about disaster recovery, and this is from Disaster Recovery Journal's definitions. They're kind of the industry standard glossary out there. But, disaster recovery is specifically, it's related to technology infrastructure, systems, and applications. Whereas if you look at business continuity, that's your overall organization, responding to business disruptions and things like that. A good example of this might be if you got a weather event and you can't get people into your building, you've got a business interruption, but, disaster recovery isn't related to it at all. So it's good to make sure that you have the two separate things segregated. I know when I was working at a big manufacturer, I remember there was a meeting I went into and came out of, and we have completely different ideas as to where we were going to go with the project at that point, because there were two different definitions of business continuity floating around. There was IT's own definition, and then there was one that the risk management department was using. So
I always like to think of business continuity as the umbrella under which disaster recovery and other services will fall.
Well put. So as far as siloing goes, here's an example that we put together. So let's say that you've got your cybersecurity part of your company, and you've got your IT infrastructure in your company. And, in this particular example, let's say we've got a building, it's on fire, the fire company comes to fight the fire. But what happens if the police decide to pull over the fire truck for running red lights and speeding on the way there? Then that's not really a productive use of the two different groups working together. They're kind of siloing. It doesn't really work in this sense, because you've got two groups that are working against each other towards a common goal. or let's and let's say they give them a speeding ticket on the way to the fire, then that's just that makes it even worse, right? Or maybe taking this a step further. Let's say that they're fighting the fire, they find a guy that's his hands are dirty and he's standing next to a can of gasoline. So like, hey, this is probably the guy that started the fire. Let's go ahead and arrest him. So one would think that it would make sense for the police to arrest him, but if we're talking in a situation where we've got, some siloing going on, they may not do that at all. We might have a situation where the fire department comes in and arrests him, which again is kind of going outside of their the scope of what they ordinarily do. They don't really have the facilities to do that.
And the ridiculous thing would be that the fire department may violate the rights of the person being accused, and therefore they get away with it to go do it again. And at the same time, who's putting out the fire?
Exactly. So you need to make sure that IT infrastructure is able to put out their fires and that security is able to do their job too. So, but definitely, business continuity starts before disaster strikes. You got to prepare for these things. Every battle's won before it's ever fought. I love that quote, and it's used in one of my favorite movies, even because it's in Wall Street. But teams definitely need to work together, and the way that happens is you create some governance, you establish some regular meetings between your business continuity, your cyber teams, so they can discuss different disaster scenarios. Encourage good relationships between the peers in each group, and then when you have tabletop exercises, you want them to participate together, so that they can prepare together for the time when response is actually needed. And then finally, and this is something a lot of companies kind of ignore, is that you want people to be involved in the change management process, because when your response plans are created, whether it's cyber response or DR plans, business continuity plans, whatever, business processes change, IT processes change, systems change, network changes. All of those things need to be incorporated into plans, and the plans need to get changed as well. And so if you bring your teams into the change management process, if cyber is a part of it, if business continuity is a part of it, DR is a part of it, then it's better for everyone. So.
Well, Kevin, you and I are both members of the Business Continuity Institute. For those of you who are not familiar with this organization, they basically have come up with a framework based upon the International Organization for Standardization. You might know them as ISO, because they are a Swiss-based organization, and in French, the letters come in a different order. But the point is, the International Organization for Standardization comes up with ways for us to standardize, and from there, the Business Continuity Institute developed a framework, and it consists of 6 professional practices. Policy and program management. What's the organization need to do to deliver goods and services? Embedding. How do we make sure that as we add infrastructure and change the environment, that business continuity isn't an afterthought? Let's design with BC in mind. Analysis, design, implementation, and validation. These are the technical practices. How do we protect the data? How do we recover the data? How do we test the recovery of the data? What did we learn from the validation test? These are all incredibly important, and these are considered IT infrastructure practices. But I want to show you the other side of the coin. You might be familiar with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, that's part of the US Commerce Department, and they have their own framework, but this is focused on cybersecurity. They have 5 core functions: identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Now, I am not a cybersecurity professional. I make no such claim. I am a business continuity professional. I focus on business continuity, disaster recovery, data protection. Yet, if we were to compare these side by side, I may not be a cybersecurity professional, but I recognize the similarities. If I have to do analysis, if I have to do design work, well, identify and detect, those seem very complementary. Protect, embed, develop policies, again, very complementary. Respond and recover, validate and implement. But as a business continuity professional, The big warning sign I have when I go to implement a new project with a customer is when cybersecurity is not part of the conversation. If we were to advance to the analysis of the BCI, and let's go ahead and bring these all up right now. I have tools and I have solutions that allow for backup and recovery, site replication, DR orchestration. I have tools and systems for monitoring and analytics. I have backup job reports. I have immutable backups so I can protect against ransomware in particular. Easy deployment that's scalable, a universal license so that we know how we will continue to protect the environment going into the future. These are all things that I should be sharing with cybersecurity. I shouldn't be treating it as an island. I shouldn't be in a silo. I should be letting the cybersecurity team know, by the way, every time we deploy a new Windows virtual machine, we're using Veeam, and this is how it's set up, and it's going to this immutable backup repo. And if we go forward once more, the same thing can be done from the cybersecurity side. They have tools that can help me as an IT infrastructure and business continuity professional. Help me understand how you do preservation of evidence, because my restore and response may wipe out things that are critical to the investigation of a crime. That's not something I do on purpose, but if I'm unaware of what you have as a requirement for preservation of evidence, I may inadvertently screw up your process. Let me know what you're doing for malware removal, port scanning. How do I contact the team and let them know about what ports I need opened up for new technology and what that new technology does so that you can actually do insightful inspection of the packets? Your intrusion detection tools. Let me know when you see a suspicious activity so that I can then check my backup reports and let you know, yeah, you know what? The data change rate has increased unexpectedly in a way that just doesn't seem right to me. And of course, I want to know about your regulations and compliance. At the end of the day, though, the important thing is that we're not looking at each other as opposition. We're not looking to simply do our job and segment only what we do away from everyone else. We want to bring each other to the table and teach each other, not just tell, but teach. How are we doing our jobs? What are we doing as part of our jobs? Why is this important to our department? And that's when we begin to find that synergy and that cohesion that brings us together to form a more resilient organization as a whole. So Kevin, any thoughts on that?
I think you covered it all very well.
Wonderful.
All right, good deal. So I wanted to talk briefly about SAYERS and the way that we approach business continuity and disaster recovery to kind of explain how that fits into what Patrick just described. So we try and take a holistic approach to business continuity. What we want to do is we want to start out and take a look at your organization as a whole. And we do this for the DR area or for the business continuity area. We do what we call a program maturity assessment to determine what needs attention. And that looks at, not necessarily even a whole lot of the technical aspects of disaster recovery. It looks specifically at the governance, the hygiene, the policies, the different things like that are in place, the metrics that you're using in order to make determinations about your DR environment or about your business continuity environment, so that we can come up with a good plan as to how to move things forward. Find areas of overlap between cybersecurity and business continuity so we can make sure that all of those individual pieces and parts are covered. And then, develop a cohesive project plan to address the immediate needs. Here's the gaps in cybersecurity, here's the gaps in business continuity, here's the gaps maybe in your DR efforts. Develop a project plan to address those, and then even, help to write the governance and metrics if needed to track program improvement. And that can be from, we've got 50% of systems getting backed up right now. We'll move that up to 75%. That could be, we've got a 4-hour turnaround on systems. We can, whittle that down to 2 hours with with some new technologies or different things like that. But yeah, figure out what your metrics are, what needs to be in place, and then, get that governance in part to make sure that everybody does their job, but also in part to make sure that we can have those different areas talking together the way that we want them to. You know, that we could have business continuity and disaster recovery and cybersecurity in the same room for those change management meetings and whatever else. And then we also, you know, as time goes on, we may well recommend different technologies to help increase the resiliency and security. If we've got somebody that's, you know, it's 100% Microsoft shop, we may go in and recommend something like Veeam or other products out there in the marketplace to help. You know, if we've got somebody where they're, you know, they've got some problems putting together their CMDB to figure out what they need to back up, we might recommend Exonius or one of the other tools out there to help. So Sayers has a lot of different companies that we're partnered with to provide different technologies, and we you know, we do the maturity assessment in part so we can help figure out what the best fit might be.
And Kevin, one of the things I like about working with Sayers is that from the Veeam side, I have the leading software solution in the world right now for data protection and recovery, but it's absolutely useless if I don't have the proper hardware to run on top of. And Sayers can bring that expertise as well as inform people as to how my solution can be used by departments outside of IT. I don't want my product put into a corner and left there just for one team to work on backups. There's so much more we can do. We can provide virtual labs for people to do testing, test those Windows updates before you put them into production. Use your backups to use production data without making any changes to the production environment. And by having Sayers and their experts show customers how that can be done, I actually bring more value to the table because now you're using all of the features that you've already paid for.
Well put. Thank you. And that's what we have. So did we leave any time for questions?